right, what's up, ladies and gentlemen? Happy Monday evening. It is 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and thank you for joining us for another Deets with Dr. A. I am Jason Ampel, aka Dr. A, and welcome for giving us your Monday evening. So whether you're watching this live, streaming on our YouTube channel and our various teacher groups around the country, we want to welcome you. And if you're watching the recording, hey, thanks for tuning in and watching the recording. So we got a great show here for you tonight. What we're doing here at the Learning Liaisons, we provide leadership and teacher test prep around the country so teachers like you can pass all their certification exams. But what we like to do also is provide some training and professional development along the way to help aspiring teachers and current teachers on a variety of topics. So tonight's topic is going to be a very popular one because I don't know if you've gone through the interview process before, but as a teacher, it could be very stressful. I've been through it before when I was back in the day when I was teaching. I've been through it at the university level. I've been through it sitting across the table for people firing questions off of you. So I know it could be nervous, anxious, depressing sometimes, depending on what questions that you get. But stay tuned here tonight because we have got an amazing show where I'm going to bring on not one, but two school principals to do a Q&A, go through some practice interviewing questions, give you the do's and don'ts, and answer any questions that you have as well so you can lower that anxiety level and know what you need to do and how to answer questions as you roll into the interview. But before I bring on our two principals, real quick, next week, we're doing the same kind of thing, but I got another group of principals for you. Oop, that's this week, sorry. I was good for one mistake. Next week, we've got 4 principals joining us too from another school district, and they're going to be talking the same thing. We're going to go through different questions, different conversations. Join us same time next week, and you also find that on our YouTube channel as well. So that's next Monday night, same thing. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to bring on our two principals tonight. We have got Christine Ray and Rhonda McMahon. Hello, ladies. How are you guys doing today?
Doing awesome, thank you.
All right, so before we roll into the questions, why don't you guys take a minute or so each and introduce yourself, talk about your journey through education, why you do what you do. I'll let you guys go at it.
Christy, go ahead.
Sure. Hi, this is my 23rd year in education. It's hard to believe. I started in Hillsborough County, started at Piso Elementary right there on USF campus. I had to throw in a local Bulls there. And then moved to Orange County, spent a couple years in Orange County, and I am now at Westside K-8 as the principal. I've been a principal. This is my 5th year as a principal. I was an assistant principal. Got a chance to work with the Gates grant. I was a new teacher mentor for a number of years, and I've taught everything in elementary school except for 4th grade.
Wow. What made you want to become a teacher?
You know, I sat down, my parents said I should be a doctor, and I tried that, and I was terrible at it, and I just didn't like it at all. And so I sat down one day and wrote down everything I've ever done in my life, and it always led back to kids. And I just said, I'm going to try being a teacher, and I never looked back. Best thing I ever did. I love it every single day, even the really cruddy days.
I love what you do, right? That's the key to success.
Yeah.
All right, how about Rhonda?
So I have been in teaching now. This is my 29th year in education. I've been 10 years as a principal, 15 as an administrator. Christy and I came from the same place and ended up at the same place. I began, though, in New Orleans a long, long time ago and moved to Florida in 2001. We both worked in Hillsborough County. I was very fortunate to be a part of the Wallace Foundation and Gates Grants initiative there in Hillsborough County, which was some tremendous training for both teachers and administrators. And then moved here in 2014 to Osceola County, where I am currently in my 4th school as principal, Celebration K-8, and super excited to be back in a middle school. My teaching I've taught everything from kindergarten to 8th grade, and I've also taught alternative certification classes at Hillsborough Community College because I was an alt-cert person. So I feel very strongly. I began my career as a secretary and went to school at night and ended up a principal. So I participate in those programs as well.
Yeah, we work with a lot of alt-cert programs here at the Learning Liaisons to help their teachers pass their certification exams so they can get on to what's more important, which is teaching the kids. So thank you, ladies. We're going to jump in some questions. So before, I know a lot of you guys are watching on our YouTube channel. If you're joining us from our Facebook groups, make sure we're putting this recording is going to be on our YouTube channel. So if you're watching live or watching the recording, make sure you go ahead and grab that URL and put it on your social media so you can share this with other future educators, so we can put some minds at ease when it comes to the interviewing process. So let's start going through these questions. So we've got a bunch of questions lined up. Some of them are very kind of ease into it, easy ones, and then we're gonna get to some more specific ones. So let's start off easy. So our first question for you guys to tackle is, what are some important things that I should do to prepare for an interview? So teachers out there getting ready to go, what are some big things you should let them know about?
Well, I'm going to tell you the very first thing that I ask once I have somebody come in and tell me a little bit about yourself, which means just that, a little bit. I want to know, what do you know about my school? Because I want to know if you've done your homework. If you're going into teaching, you need to do your homework. You need to know if my school is the right school for you. So just as I tell them, it's like being in a marriage, that you're at school most of the day, and so you could be the best teacher ever, and I could be the best principal ever. But if we don't work well together, then that's not the best school for you. So I really want to know, has somebody done their homework? Do they know what demographics are like at my school? Do they know the initiatives we have? Do we know just even how many students we have? Oftentimes, I would say in the past couple of years, I've had very few people coming in having done any research at all, not even to the fact of where they know where the school is, if we're doing a virtual thing. So that's really an important thing for me.
So if someone comes in there and you interview with them and they don't know questions about demographics, is that something that really kind of turned you off and you're probably already closed the door of them, or is that just a small little factor?
No, it depends. I mean, my very first question is, so tell me what you know about the school. And if I get well, not very much really, then I'll tell them a little bit about it. And I'll still continue the interview because I think that's an important piece to do. Mm-hmm. But it's also important that you know where you're applying. And it's important that you know the types of students you're going to deal with. Christine and I have very, very different kinds of schools, very different parent populations, very different learning needs for our students. And if you don't know that going in, it's kind of a flag for me. Like, if you're not prepared for your interview, which is probably the most conceivable, difficult thing you're going to do, how are you going to be prepared for teaching? Are you going to have lesson plans? Are you going to, be at school prepared? So it's kind of one piece, not the only piece.
I know some people will figure out how to find that, but what would you tell a teacher or a college student that says, how do I find out the demographics?
Well, I have actually a trick for that. If you call the school 10-year prospective parents, you can ask all sorts of questions that you wouldn't ordinarily know. And I'll tell you, the question that irritates me the most and it is when somebody asks the address to the school. Because I think, are you kidding me? You can't Google the address, and I get it all the time. Yep. If you Google the address to the school, you're going to not be able to manage being in classrooms. So
about taking the initiative, go Google it, find it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yeah, it's good that you point that out, because a lot of people, they might not think about that. They might think, well, let me just find out. It's easier, right? But you got to think ahead. Very awesome. So do you have anything you want to add to that one, Christy, from your experience?
I totally agree. Rhonda and I could not have two different schools. It's funny because we're both K-8s and we're located just on the other side of I-4 from each other. But my school needs and what Rhonda's school's needs are totally different. And I want people to know coming in what to expect. And so having done some homework, and even a lot of people look at our Facebook feed or they'll look at, our Instagram, kind of see the vibe of what's going on. It can tell you a lot too, because yes, you're interviewing for a job, but don't necessarily take the first job you get, because it might not be you might not be cut out for a school where there's high need students, or you might not be cut out where there's high need parents, because those take different, very difficult skill sets. So interview the school just as much as they're interviewing you. And if you research ahead of time, you at least have some questions to ask, like, I noticed that you have, this going on, tell me about it. Or one of the things that we always ask, and I'm sure you'll get to it, is do you have any questions? Come with some questions and some things that you want to know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's real important. You guys pointed out the whole aspect of learning about the school, because I'm in a situation where when I was teaching, I had a lot of people I became friends with that ultimately became principals, and I had these conversations and talk with them, and they tell me, and I never even thought about this, about the amount of teachers that just don't make it after the first year because they didn't realize the demographics. You can be an amazing teacher, graduate 4.0 with this whole portfolio of amazing lesson plans, but you have to know the demographics and how to reach kids in different areas. So regardless of where you are in the country watching this, all of these rules apply in any state. So good, it's awesome that you guys point out the fact of, research the school beforehand and learn a little bit about it.
If nothing else, visit the webpage.
There you go. And Google the address. Don't ask the principal.
Please don't ask. Please don't. Unless there's two schools with the same name, then I could totally understand. But there is only one Westside.
Awesome. All right. So our next question might sound like a silly one, but how do I dress for an interview?
You would be surprised. That is not a good question. I would say you dress like business casual. You don't have to wear complete heels, and men don't have to necessarily wear a tie, but you should look like you want a job. I've had people up in flip-flops. It's not the time to show up casual. People show up with a sleeveless shirt and no jacket, and I understand you're poor, starving college students, but borrow an outfit. Borrow something from someone that looks respectable. And I always want to see the 3 Bs. I don't want to see your boobs, your belly, or your butt.
What was that again? The 3 Bs?
3 Bs, boobs, belly, or butt. I don't want to see any of them. So bend over, lean over in the mirror and see. And men, if you have the shirt that chokes you to death and you're not able to breathe, just look presentable. Spend a little bit on a decent outfit. It doesn't have to be from a fancy store so that you look the part. Awesome.
What about you, Rhonda? What do you think?
I could not agree more. It definitely is not the time for flip-flops. I cannot tell you, we're in Florida, and flip-flops are everywhere, but they should not be on your interview because people do judge you by how you present yourself. You don't need to be in a suit, but you need to be neat and you need to be presentable and you need to look like you want the job. I think Christy pegged it right there.
Awesome. Yeah. And for all the people, we got a lot of people joining on, watching us. You guys are free to ask questions too. We're going to go through a bunch of Q&A and interview questions. So if you feel like something that Christy or Rhonda says or I say and you have any questions, go ahead and throw them in the comment box, whether you're watching live or watching the recording. One thing I do want to ask you guys that I didn't throw on the question list, and I see this a lot in various teacher groups and college students, when they have questions or concerns about tattoos. Is that something legality-wise, or is it more of perception-wise when someone comes into an interview about having tattoos showing?
So go ahead, Christy. You want?
No, you're okay.
I have 3. No, I have 2. My daughter has 3. Mine are covered. I don't have an issue with tattoos. I think right now it's the norm. 20 years ago when I went in, it was not. But I don't really. I've never had if somebody walks in with a tattoo, I look more at how well spoken are you? Are you neat in any other way? In every other way. What do you know? That's the biggest thing for me as a teacher, and how do you speak to people? So tattoos are not a big deal for me.
Do you think that there are some school leaders, if I walked into an interview and I had sleeve tattoos on my arm, that's any kind of, do you think it depends on the school leader across the table, unfortunately, or is that somewhat of a standard?
I think it could depend. And I will say what I've told my own children at their age is, if you're going to get a tattoo, consider putting it somewhere where you can cover it up. I feel like they're kind of it. And it's not to say you can't put them, but there are people who will judge if you have them on your hands or you have them. And if it's tasteful, then that's fine. But I think you really need to think about it. And I think back, I do have a tattoo, and I got it when I was really young, and it's super dumb. And if I'd put it somewhere where people could see it, they would judge me, my 18-year-old self. So I just I urge people, when you're getting them, just think about, your career, and maybe don't get them where you can see them initially. But
anything like that.
Where it doesn't necessarily, I don't notice that as much as I notice the way you're dressed. And, if you have cat hair all over, you get a roller and roll the cat hair off. Just look like you care, because I almost think it's like a marriage. You're at your very best in the interview, and you're only going to go there on the best foot, so I can see what you're capable of.
All right, very good. So our next question, when we talk about responding to a school leader in an interview, can an answer be too short or too long?
I think
yes to both.
You kind of have a nice balance. And if you're a long-winded person, you kind of need to think about, I always think about the STAR method. I want to tell you my situation, task, my what I did, my analyzation, and then my response. So if you can kind of keep to that, it'll keep you from being too long-winded. And at the same time, you know, if you're too short, then I don't get a real feel. But I'll tell you, people talk and they just sort of hang themselves by the end, because you just end up talking your way out of a position. So if you know you're long-winded, think about it. And like I'm repeating myself now, that tells me I should have stopped about 10 seconds ago, because now I'm repeating myself.
What was that method you said again? What was the letters?
The STAR method. So it's situation, task, what your action was, and what your results are. So I did this, I took this action, and this was my result.
Very good. I like that. Okay, awesome. All right, so next one. What if I don't know the answer to a question that's asked in an interview? Have you guys ever had someone just look at you with like a blank space, like not really? Yeah, okay.
Well, you freeze time, and you might have, I don't know about you all, but I always think of the joke 10 seconds ago, like the comeback. And so you just freeze sometimes and just forget everything. So I would say, and Rhonda, I'll let you answer it too, but I would say make it up. Nobody knows. Somebody is told the situation. Use their story. Nobody's going to know necessarily that it wasn't specifically you, but make it about yourself, like what your response would be. But honestly, and don't be afraid to take a minute to kind of think through. If you're stumped, say, will you give me a minute? It feels super awkward, but it's really only 5 or 6 seconds, and take that time to think about your answer.
So I can't say something like, that's a good question. Let me get back to you on that one.
I agree with Christy 100%. It is okay to take time, and people do get nervous in interviews, and we understand that. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of go by the tone of the person. If I can see that they're just really nervous, then I kind of prompt them a little bit. It's like, yeah, I get it. You're nervous. Don't worry about it. Take some time to think about it. Mm-hmm. So it is always good to kind of think through. I rehearse every time I interview. Like when I'm driving there or prior to, I think about all the questions that people could conceivably ask me. And then I ask other people, what do you think they might ask me? And then if I rehearse my answers to those, when I get into that situation, I'm much less likely to freeze up if I do get nervous, because people get nervous. And it's okay, especially if you're a brand new teacher, you might not know the answer to that. Mm-hmm. And if you say, well, you know, I don't really know, I've never been in that situation before, because I'm very scenario based when I do my interviewing. I'll tell me about a time you did this. Tell me about a time you did that. When I'm dealing with new teachers, they don't have those experiences always. And so I might say, well, tell me about the best teacher you ever had, so that gives me an idea of what kind of teacher they may end up being. So I try to kind of adjust my questioning for people if you don't know too many of them, though, that's a problem.
Well, we do have some questions rolling in, so I'm gonna throw these on the screen for you guys. So first one is from Alexa, who's watching on our Facebook page. When would you suggest are the best months for teachers to apply for jobs? So I know, Christy, you said before, I believe you still have vacancies. I don't know, Alexa, where are you located? Because Christy's looking for a middle school teacher.
I am. I'm looking for middle school ELA 6th grade, which means if you're K-5 certified, you can teach 6th grade. Honestly, all the time, because there's always vacancies. But I start looking for next year in February and March. So if you're looking to get a job, like I fill most of my positions, but I really want them all filled by April, because things happen in the summer, and then I have you know, things open up, and then I can fill those. I don't have to worry about the other ones that I know about.
Yeah, I would agree with Christy. Also, like looking in December, if you're a graduate who's maybe graduating in December, there's a lot of times openings come up in January, and it's certainly not too early to start doing it for the previous year. My goal is always to have all my known vacancies, because typically by March, I know when I want all those filled by spring break. So if I know people are going to be out, or there's likely that people are going to be leaving, and I've got my eye on somebody, I try to hold something for them so that I can get them in there as quickly as possible.
Sorry, Christy. Alexa says she's teaching kindergarten currently.
I know.
She's in the area.
6th grade might not be her jam, but that's all right.
We got a question.
You might be interested.
We got a question coming in from our YouTube channel. How on earth can I get a teaching job with just a statement of eligibility?
So statement of eligibility can get you a job. It depends what the eligibility is, but you can teach out of field for a year. while you're working on that permanent certification. I hire a lot of people that are superstars. You can tell they're going to be superstars with that statement of eligibility. So you just got to apply. If you're not getting calls, it could be your resume, or it could be that you're just not applying more open-mindedly. So for example, if your statement of eligibility is in social studies, that's probably not going to happen. So everybody's a social studies teacher. It's very easy to get a social studies teacher. But if you apply for a language arts position, or if you're looking at maybe 5th grade departmentalized, you might have a better opportunity at getting picked up by somebody. And then as you get experience, you can move into your dream job of perhaps social studies.
Yeah. And it depends too on the state. Florida does hire with statements of eligibility all the time. I've hired people, like I just hired an animal trainer from Disney. Animal trainers make great teachers, by the way, because they can train those kids.
In the class.
And she got her eligibility afterwards. So we were able to push her through and help with that. So it just depends on the state where you're coming from and what particular area you're looking at. Again, things like math and science, those are really hard to fill. And so we bend over backwards to get good people into those jobs.
Yeah, awesome. And that's really ultimately what it's about. It's about getting good people. If you're good people, I will find a way to get you in my building.
There you go. That's what teachers like to hear there. So we got another great question coming in. How do they look at age, too young or too old to teach? So I think they're assuming they're asking, is age relevant for you as you're hiring teachers? I mean, are you allowed to do that?
No, you're not. It's illegal.
Even if it was a thought in my mind, some of my best teachers are my oldest and my youngest. And you would never know. So I never look at age. It's never even a consideration. I just look at you as a person.
Yep.
Awesome. So we got another question here. What would you suggest are the top things that a teacher should research when picking a school in a new state? So Alexa had a question before. She's thinking about moving from Florida to Tennessee. What do you think? What would your advice to her to look for when she's researching?
Well, first of all, I don't think we should be helping her get out of the state of Florida because we have a shortage of teachers. But because I'm kind, I will. I think, Alexa, you do like you do in Florida. You know, the Department of Education here in Florida has a tremendous amount of information on their website. And that's part of federal law, having all the guidelines, you know, talking about the demographics and things like that. You can find that on our state website. I'm assuming you can do the same in any state that you go to. When I moved from Louisiana to Florida, I narrowed down where I wanted to be at. And then I looked at the school districts. I went on the district websites. I made calls to them to find out how user-friendly is the website. I wanted to know what you needed to do to get certified. And then I started looking at schools. And I looked at schools, again, based on their website. A lot of places, they don't keep that stuff up to date. And if they don't keep it up to date, that's kind of a flag for me as a teacher. And I'm talking teacher aspect or an employee aspect right now. I want to know who the principal is. I want to know what the teachers look like. I want to see pictures of kids on their webpage because that gives me a feeling for the culture of the school. And I want to pick up the phone and I want to call and ask some questions, like Christy said, because that's something that's also going to tell you the culture of the school. So I would say, like anything else, do your homework. Imagine that you're a parent who is going to put your kid in the school. You're doing the same thing. You're shopping for a school and kind of research it that way.
I would say you can tell a whole lot by the person that answers the phone at a school and about what's important at that school. And I would stalk the social media, Instagram and Facebook. You know, we don't keep the website as current. Now I'm going to go do that. Thanks, Rhonda. Kids can see the website, but man, we flood Facebook with constant things that we're doing. Yep. And you can really get a feel for what's important for the school based on what they post.
I will tell you what not to do. Do not go to greatschools.org. That every person who's angry and upset goes there. And I have been at some incredible schools, and I know some incredible principals who have worked at schools who have just got blasted there. It's like much social media. People who are very angry and vocal get heard, and the people who are happy generally don't.
So you're saying if I call the school to ask questions and I hear nothing but screaming in the background, like kids are running around,
run away,
probably not a good sign.
Or if they're kind of short or rude, or they don't take the time to you, that tells you that that's not important. In fact, I called for a reference on somebody just the other day to a school nearby, not in Osceola County, of course. and they were just downright not nice. And I thought, wow, I work there because they're just not nice. They were rude and they were kind of leery of me. And I just thought, ooh, I got a bad vibe.
All right. So I'm going to turn the focus a little bit on these questions now. We're going to turn to more of questions that a teacher can get sitting across the table from an administrator. So maybe we could talk a little about how to answer it and how not to answer it, maybe give some feedback along the way as well. So here we go. Here's the first one. So why did you decide to become a teacher? So if I'm the teacher sitting across the table for you interviewing, what should I do and not do when answering this kind of question?
I can
Don't say I want summers off.
Yes. Or I'm just looking for a job, because I had that. My job, I'm on furlough right now, so I need a job. I was like, oh, okay, we're done. Thanks.
Yeah, I think it's having a passion for kids. That needs to come through in your answers. And even if you've not been teaching before, bring up instances when you've been around children and the interactions you've had and the difference you think you can make. But seriously, we have both had people who have given ridiculous answers like, I want Christmas and summers off. Teachers work a lot, a lot more than people think. So that's really not a good answer.
Okay.
And just honestly, we're looking for your passion. Whatever you say to them, whatever really your reasoning is, other than something ridiculous like I want summers off, we're going to see your passion, and it lets us know what's important to you. So, whether I decided because my sister had special needs and she had teachers that helped her get where she was, so whatever reasoning is behind why you decided, just let your passion show. That's what we're looking for, your heart.
You probably don't want to go like standard, I just want to help kids. You want to be very specific and articulate your answers and give examples.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Next potential question. Tell me what qualities you believe are essential to being a good teacher. Of those qualities, which is the most important and why? So how would a teacher should and should not answer this?
What's great about this question is there isn't necessarily a right or wrong answer. To ask this question because it's sort of open-ended, and it'll let me get to your core value. Now, your core value could be something that I'm looking for. It could be something that I'm not looking for, but it's all about figuring out, like Rhonda said, are you the right fit for our school, or are you the right fit for somewhere else? Because it doesn't mean that you're not going to be a good teacher. It just might not be what I'm looking for. But I would say for a good teacher, we're looking for, patience, kid first. But ultimately, what do you think is important for being a good teacher, and which one to you is most important and why? That's going to let me know about yourself.
Yeah, I agree with Chrissy. And the other thing too, she mentioned that, it might not be the right fit for her school, but principals are on the phone talking to one another all the time. And she has sent me an email and said, oh, I can't hire this person, but you need to interview them. I know you have an opening here. So remembering that even though you answer the question and you might not feel like that it was the right one for that school, that doesn't mean that we're not talking and there's not another place that's a good place for you.
Awesome. Okay, next one. Describe the aspects of your background that best qualify you for this position.
You want me to take that, Christy?
My mic was getting muted and unmuted. Sorry.
That's okay. So I would say for this one, we're looking at any interaction you've had with students. So it's really important for me. You may not have experience being a teacher, but I want to know what experience you've had interacting with kids, and if not with kids, with the public in general. Because basically we're in the business of customer service. We do it with kids. We do it educating kids, but I want to know, first of all, that you have the ability to deal with people in a setting that may not always be the easiest to deal with them in. So without experience, I would say any interactions you have with people, let us know about those. But then if you're a new teacher and you were a summer camp counselor, or you were an animal trainer, or one of those things that can provide some information on how you're going to be able to handle classroom behavior, because that's a big one, especially in different types of school, that's what we're looking for in that one.
And really, how can you multitask and prioritize what's important and keep yourself organized? That's important. And any chance that you've had to plan something, that's always good experience too. You know, I had one girl that worked at Disney, and she didn't necessarily work with children, but she managed to turn the question into how she helped the parents of kids that were struggling have a good experience. And so she really into her background to pull out the pieces that she knew would make her a good teacher.
And that's good that you guys mentioned. That's perfect for those college students or interns or people changing careers. Are like, I never worked in a school, having experience. How am I supposed to make that relevant? Well, you guys just answered that, pulling from certain skills from your jobs. I bet this is something you have to prepare for ahead of time. Just knowing that you're going to get a question around that, to be prepared to be able to explain that and use your past experiences to bring them into the classroom.
And honestly, sometimes working with the public adults is a lot harder than working with a classroom. Sometimes the adult issues are just as good.
Awesome. All right, next question that a potential teacher might get an interview. What are your thoughts on, oh, I'm hearing some feedback, I think, on you, Chrissy.
Is it on me?
Yes, it's you.
You got your earbuds in? No? All right, I'm going to for a second. So what are your thoughts on parental involvement? What relationship would you want to establish with our parents and students? So if a teacher was getting this question asked to them across from the table, how should you respond to this? How shouldn't you respond?
So
well, I would say,
sorry,
go ahead. I would say, think about you. First of all, if you have kids, always think about yourself as a parent. How do you respond? Because people go into career, you know, later, second career or whatever. Think about, what do you want from the school when you're dealing with your children? If you're a brand new teacher, you want to think about, I always say, try to think about something that you can make connection with, because you get in the interview, you freeze, but you were in school, you had teachers, you had parent-teacher conferences, and you know how it was when your parent had to interact with the teacher. So try to pull on something in your background that's going to help you answer that. And then you want to understand that whether you're at Christie's school, was very different involvement than my school, or my school, you want to always be available to parents. You want to always reach out to parents. You always want to have good communication with parents. Now, I'll tell you, the one thing that I hate to hear is, I always make good calls home. Because what I've found is that most people don't. They all say that in the interview, but that's not what's useful to me, because I know that that's an interview trick that everybody does. So I might ask you very specific things. I might say, so tell me about a time when a parent came in very angry. How did you handle it? Because I want to see how they handle that conflict piece too. If they've not been a teacher, I might say, tell me about a time when somebody at work, you had something. And so it gives me an idea of how you're going to communicate with people. The typical responses we're going to get are, I would email them, I would phone call them. But I want to know what you're going to do above and beyond. We all know you have to communicate with parents. How are you going to do that? What does that look like? So be very specific in what your way of communicating is. There's more than one way to communicate. Some people are great using technology. Class Dojo, for the school districts that use it, is a great tool to communicate with parents. We use Remind. There are all kinds of ways to do it. It just needs to be done.
I would say too, just picking up the phone and calling is, I find that a lot of times new teachers and even seasoned teachers are almost afraid of parents.
Yep.
And parents just want what's best for their kids. So if you keep that in mind, yes, they can be jerks about it. And yes, they can be rude, but ultimately they just are either frustrated or they want what's best for their own child. So don't be afraid to reach out to them and talk to them. And if they're rude and awful to you, you can always go to your administration for that support, but they will move mountains when they know that you care about their students.
So I'd like to do is kind of take this question a little bit and alter a little. And I don't know if you guys have the same responses or maybe something different you could add. What about now with the new normal and COVID and communication? Does this change a little bit for teachers? If you're hiring a teacher, for example, now or after the new year, is this something you're going to address people with their level of involvement or lack of involvement for parents with kids not signing on for whatever reason? Is this change this conversation at all?
It does, because we do have a lot of issues right now with our absent digital learners. And I think it's even more important to reach out to families, because I spent 54 minutes Friday afternoon on the phone with a parent who was very angry at a teacher because the teacher said her daughter had a test the next day and she was an ESE student. She was going to fail. And how could she do that? And then as I logged on as her child and I had her log on as her child and we walked through, and I completely diffused the situation because as the parent saw, the teacher had done a fabulous job in setting up this digital learning platform. It was amazing. Everything was there. And once mom saw, oh, she did have that. Oh, look at how many times she was told about this. Oh, I think that completely diffused it. And then you're going to get a different response from the parent. A parent's going to listen to their child at first. So the child's going to say, I'm doing my work. The teacher's mean, whatever. You have to be the one who approaches it in a way that's just very calm and rational and say, I understand you're frustrated. Let's talk about this because I want to help you. Those words can help more than anything you can do in writing, in the classroom, whatever. You have to have those relationships in order to continue to build on what the students need.
And so for me, I would say it's always been that critical. You know, I have a lot of absenteeism, and if they don't have a relationship with the teacher, they won't come to school. But if they have a relationship with the teacher, they will come every single day and bug mom and come. So parental involvement at my school looks very, very different. My parents believe that they trust us and they're just going to send their kid to our school and they trust whatever decisions we make for them. That for them is their involvement, and they work 3 jobs, so they're really busy. But it isn't that they don't care. They're just not able to physically be at the school. And so that relationship is critical to help kind of, same thing that Rhonda said, kind of stop those issues from happening.
And that could be a good question for the teacher going into the interview to ask the administrator, what kind of systems do you have in play to communicate with parents? You know, the Classroom Dojo, the Remind Me, things like that. Because if you could start talking about some of those apps, I'm like, oh, well, this person knows a thing or two about communication. I would think.
Exactly.
Would you get that kind of connotation from someone if they started asking questions about or mentioning specific apps?
I did Absolutely. I get a lot of questions about parental involvement. That's one of the top questions people ask is, what's my parental involvement? And that's a good question.
Awesome. So next one up that a teacher might get sitting across the table from a principal. Tell me about a program or project you developed in your last role. Describe the program or project. What was your role and what were the results of this? So once again, like you mentioned before, you might not have the education background, but it's all about tying that in.
And this one's a good one for a leadership role. So those of you who are looking to move beyond the teacher role and into a leadership role, this is a good thing to think about. When you move into those roles, people are going to ask you these questions. Principals are going to know, what did you do above and beyond being just a classroom teacher? So as you're starting to grow, probably year 5 or 6, you're going to start thinking about maybe either being a team lead or being PLC lead, or maybe even moving into a whole school role. So start asking for opportunities to do these things.
Well, Rhonda, did you have anything you wanted to add to that one? Or
Nope, I absolutely think Christy covered it. I do think that also shows how you're able to follow something from beginning to the end. So that's a really good thing as well. But no, it just shows a lot about the process, and I think that's a good thing.
This is one of those questions, Christy, you talked about before about not knowing the answer to a question. You know,
so funny because this was the question that stumped me, which is why I always put it on here, because I read 100 books, articles, and I was in an assistant principal interview and they asked me this and I went, I could not.
So I would think if you're sitting across the table and the principal and the assistant principal says, tell me about a significant professional article, a book, something about education, how's it going to impact your work on school? I mean, I don't know. I would think, my assumption, you guys do this all the time, is most people will go, oh my Lord, what am I supposed to say here?
I would just say it tells you always be learning. So you don't have to remember the specific article or book, but be keeping up with things and talk about those things and how it'll impact your work. So really the goal of this is that you're constantly learning and growing. And like I said, I read professional articles or books all the time, but when I was asked to give this specific, I looked at it as I needed the specific name of that book or article. And then when I stepped back, I said, oh, they're just looking for what am I learning about right now? So I was able to answer the question.
That's a good one. I've not had that one before. Good job, Christy.
So,
Good old Hillsborough County.
For all of you aspiring teachers out there, or people going to the interview, make sure you focus on an Arctic scholarly journal or something about education. Get ready to talk about it. And now people are going to get scared and go, "Oh my God, I have to memorize something."
No, read some books that are just easy reads. I'm reading one right now. It's called Messaging Matters, and it's all about communication with families.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not a difficult journal. I'm also reading lots of journal articles because I'm working on my doctorate. But it's not a difficult read, and it gives you some really useful hands-on things that you can apply at any point in time. So that's a good question, Christy.
Based on this question, I would probably say, and you guys agree with me or not, don't talk about any like news articles like in the news now. I'll probably stay away from any of that. No.
Yeah.
Do not. So 3 arguments you can't win: religion, money, or politics. So just don't even go there.
All right. So here's another question. Our school holds a lot of school events. Tell me about a major event you manage in your current role. What was the event? What was your role? How did it turn out?
So again, this one was more for those of you moving into a leadership role.
Mm-hmm.
It's about that follow through and what do you bring to the school? Because we know that a school can't run if you clock in and clock out. If you just get there when you're supposed to arrive and you leave, that is just not the nature of teaching. You want to be in a school where you can be part of the culture of the school. And so you might have a passion right now. It's Hispanic heritage. Maybe that's your passion. And you can say, oh yeah, I helped out my school when I did this Hispanic heritage event. Or my big thing is sports. I was a coach, and it just shows your commitment to the community beyond the role of teaching. Sad as it is, you're going to spend most of your life at the school. So you might as well like where you are and be a part of it. But that's what I love about teaching is that that I don't feel like I have to volunteer and go in and help in kitchens and stuff like that, because my life is a donation as well. I feel like I help people every day, and that's really important to me.
And I would say kind of a version of this for people who aren't, who are new teachers and are not going into it. I always ask, what other things are you interested in that you could bring to our school? Because we have clubs and things after school. And like Christy said, being a part of the school community is a really big deal, especially at a school like mine. The families are very, very supportive. They're very, very involved because they have the time, and they do expect those extra things that we do. So, whether it's a journalism club or a gardening club, I had a group of my 8th graders on my principal's advisory council ask if they could have a home ec club because they wanted to learn how to do their taxes and write checks.
That must be a thing, because our students ask the same thing. So that must be a trend on social media. Maybe there's a TikTok about it.
I don't know.
Yeah, the same thing. That's funny.
Would you guys ever ask a person in an interview about whether or not they would attend, let's say middle school and high school athletic events or anything like that? Or can you see yourself as a part of this school culture outside of the classroom? Is that something that administrators typically ask about?
So the way that I phrase that, oh, sorry, Christy. The way I phrase that is we have a lot of events after school. And while I don't expect you to come to every one of them, I do expect to see your presence at some of the big events, because it is important as a teacher that you do have those things. Kids love to see their teachers at events. I don't want you to take all of your time and be at every event, but it is important to be visible in the community and to be part of that. That's how you build relationships with kids. More importantly, that's how you build relationships with their parents, so that when there are issues, if you have that relationship with a parent, it's very easy to get angry at somebody you've never met. It is not easy to get angry at somebody that you've seen at the ball game and they came up and talked to you, and it develops a different relationship, and that's really important.
That's a great point. I like that. You can't.
That was super deep, Rhonda. That is absolutely true. And I remember one of my most challenging students. I showed up to his baseball game, and I just spent the afternoon talking to his mom. It took me an hour. I didn't stay the whole time, and that changed my relationship with him because he saw me as more than just a teacher in the school. And his mom would do anything that I asked her to do after she knew I cared.
Yep.
Awesome. A lot of great stuff getting shared here. Awesome. So describe your understanding of and work with PLCs in your current role. So professional learning community, for those college students out there watching, maybe they're not 100% sure what that is. You want to kind of go over briefly what that means? Because I'm sure they'll hear that.
Oh yeah, you got to know what a PLC is. So we don't work in silos any longer. We work collaboratively. And that takes, sometimes you get along with your PLC and sometimes you don't. And I actually ask, tell me about a time when it didn't go well in your PLC so that they can disrupt conflict management. Because guys, you're going to have some conflict. If you're doing it right, you're going to have some conflict with some of your teacher friends. And you have to get out of your emotion and get into what we're really here and really focused on, which is why if you put kids first, you're never wrong. So if you think what's the best for my students and you make that decision, but understanding of PLCs is, do you even understand what a PLC is? And then how did you function within that and go through the struggles and triumphs of a PLC?
And for a new teacher, you're not going to have that experience with PLC unless, of course, you had that opportunity in an internship. But for the alt-cert people who may not have had that, or for somebody who didn't have that opportunity in the internship, that might be paraphrased to be, tell me about a time you worked on a group project and how did that turn out? Because it's really what it is. It's working as a group to plan and accomplish a goal. And so in teaching, it's planning lessons and accomplishing student learning.
I would say too, going back to Alexa's question about, going to a new state, they may use acronyms you don't know. You may not know what something is. It's okay to ask and say, I'm not really sure what that is. Can you explain it to me? Or if you don't know, say, maybe they ask you, how do you work with NWEA, which is a new diagnostic that we're using? You might say, I don't know about it, but I am willing to learn. What can I do to learn more about it before I start? So that shows that I don't know, but I'm going to find out and that you have some drive.
Awesome. All right. Next question. What can you bring to our school that makes you unique?
So for me, this one is, I'm always looking for, it's not just about, I can teach you how to teach in a classroom. I can teach you the curriculum, but I can't replace who you are. And everybody that I hire brings something different to the table. And so it's, what are you proud of? What are your talents? What are your skills? What is it that you bring uniquely? And it tells me when I ask this question, what do you think is important? So what you say kind of goes into your core values and what's important to you. So that's one of the things that I ask, and that's the reason I ask it.
Yeah, exactly. It's just another way to get to know somebody and know, because when you're in an interview, you are at your best, like Christy said before. And it kind of gets down to the inner you, what you are really like and how well you fit in that school. Because again, it's about a total fit, not just, are you a good teacher? Am I a good principal?
Do you think if I'm somebody, for example, that likes technology, do you think something like this is an example where I can give some examples on how I might use technology in the classroom, or what I use in college for my college student?
Yeah, and even the animal trainer. I mean, gosh, how cool is that? I have all this advanced knowledge of animals, and I have people that can sing, and I have people that can, just, it's amazing what unique needs that you think aren't important. Think of something that makes you unique. It also lets me know how confident you are in yourself. Don't be afraid to brag about yourself a little bit.
And sometimes it's that one thing that really pushes you over and kind of separates you out from the pack. So when I moved from Louisiana to Florida to become a teacher, the thing that got everybody's attention was I was big with technology, and I had written some grants for Macintosh computers. And so as soon as they heard Macintosh, they had all these Mac computers at their school, and it was like they were calling people over to talk to me, and it was a big deal. For me, it was just, well, I like using Mac computers, but for them, it was a big flag. So you never know what else they're looking for.
That goes back to the research too. When you're researching the school, look for, every school has a thing, that they're kind of known for, that's important to them. And so sometimes you can look at that thing and know, for example, my school, a lot of ELL students. So being bilingual is kind of a huge, you don't have to be bilingual. What strategy do you have for ELL students that might be unique? So I had one person come in and talked all about their use of immersive reader, and it was different, and it actually brought immersive reader into the school. So look, it's like I said.
That. I had that question. There you go. We can talk about this.
Well, and I will add, kind of tagging on to that, what Christy was saying, you know, you might not have strategies for that, but you might have traveled a lot. And so for me, having somebody come into an interview who's done a lot of traveling, I understand that they're able to interact with different people from different places. And my school is very, very diverse. I know Christie's is diverse as well. Our whole district is, as a matter of fact. We've got like 6 different languages at my school. And people look at it and think, oh, it's just this white, you know, middle class school. But you don't know what is in the environment if you don't do the research and you don't find out. So I think bringing in, for new teachers or teachers who are alt certified, bringing in some of those other things that you may not be able to answer this particular question, how you support literacy, but you can say, well, I've done a lot of traveling. I did a study abroad. And doing that, I understand what it's like to be a non-native speaker in a country. And so you can bring in some of those experiences.
I feel like, especially a teacher who is, or I should say a college student who hasn't gotten their first teaching job, I would think that a question like this would really probably stump them. Mm-hmm. They weren't aware that something like this might be asked. Mm-hmm. Because if you were interviewing me and I never taught before, and I literally said, well, I'm not sure because I don't have it. I never taught kids that English is not their first language. What would be your response as a school leader? Would you just try to keep the conversation going and have them probe them for something, or just move on to the next one?
I probably, like Rhonda, I tailor the questions to the experience of, like, I would ask a new teacher very different questions than somebody that sees it.
Okay.
But for this one, you know, let's say you are asked this question and you don't know, it might be a good opportunity to say, you know what, I don't know, but do you have a reading coach? Because I would love to work with your reading coach to learn these things. You know, so ask what support is there for you, because if they're just going to leave you out to the wolves to figure this out on your own, that's a problem. You need support. You need to know that I have this need. I'm going to work really hard to learn it, but I need some help on the backside.
And I will say, Christy brings up a good point that I've noticed more and more with new teachers in the interviewing in the past few years. A lot of new teachers are coming asking that question, you know, what support do you offer to new teachers? And that's a perfectly okay question to ask, because we know as a brand new teacher, you're going to need support. Even as an experienced teacher, when I moved from Louisiana to Florida, they were completely different systems. When I moved from Hillsborough County to Osceola County, they were completely different systems, and they have different lingo and they have different programs they use. So teachers are always going to need support, whether they're first starting out or whether they're switching from one school to another or one district to another. And it's okay to say, what supports do you have in place? Because that's part of that marriage piece where you want to make sure it's good for both of you and not just the person who's doing the interviewing.
And I will say that brings up a really good point. One of the questions I'll ask is, when I call your previous boss or principal, one area of strength and one area they're going to tell me you need to grow. And listen, we all have areas that need to grow. I will be careful if you say classroom management. Be careful when you say that one. It's okay to admit you need help with classroom management, but don't just say classroom management. Just say, you know, I'm really working on proper engagement strategies to keep students engaged in the lesson. What is it specifically about classroom management that you struggle with, so that we kind of know whether it's a good fit? You know, maybe you're struggling with the literacy of students. So come at it with, this is my area where I need to grow, but this is what I'm doing about it.
Mm-hmm. And that kind of brings me to another question I had for you guys. Is this, you know, I remember being asked this question before, but is this something that principals still, you should be prepared to answer? How do you handle a student who is constantly disrupted or defiant? Is this, and also, is it something you would help someone? Because you made a good comment I never thought of before, Christy, about you tailor the questions depending on the resume and their background. Would you ask a college student something like this? I mean, is this something across the board?
Yeah, I would. And even if they haven't, like, if I have someone who doesn't have teaching background, I would still ask them, when is the time you dealt with a child who was difficult? Sometimes I just say difficult. The correct answer is not call the office, FYI. That is not the answer. But we're looking for relationship building. What are you going to do to help build? Because honestly, a kid is either looking for power, or they're looking for attention, or they're looking to avoid. So if you can come up with why the kid is being constantly disruptive or defiant, you dig into what the kid is what the need is. So we're looking for, are you going to just brush it off, or are you going to dig in and see what that student needs to be better?
Mm-hmm. All right, awesome. So what about this question? What do you feel the biggest challenges facing today's education system? I would think someone would have to be very careful on certain things that they say to this answer. I don't know. That's just me. What do you guys think about this question? What are maybe some do's and don'ts for this?
Well,
Again,
I would say
religion, politics, money. Stay away.
Yeah. So you want to, one of the best advice, some of the best advice I ever got was always turn anything that's a negative into a positive. So if you ask me about my weaknesses and I might have difficulty organizing things, I might turn it into, well, oftentimes I have so many things that I want to try and do. And so sometimes I have to stop myself. So I'm turning that into a positive. This is the same thing. We all know there are things in education that are less than idyllic, but we don't want to bring those out during an interview process. So I think that you can talk about a lot of things in here. You can talk about technology and how we have to constantly be competing with it. You can talk about families are very busy. Right now, you can talk about the pandemic. There are things that distract us. What you want to get back to, though, is the positive part of it. So you never want to, anytime you're in an interview, no matter what comes up, there are challenges in education. What you don't want to say is, these kids today, that's a big one. Kids are kids.
Right?
Yeah. Kids are kids. They've always been kids. They have the same behaviors that they've had throughout history. It's how do they show up that may be different. So you have to really be very active about that. So address challenges. It might be that you think education is underfunded, but despite that, what are you going to do to make it better? So you really want to turn it into a positive.
Mm-hmm. Okay, awesome.
That's great advice, Rhonda.
So I had a question too, like a sidebar question to this. As administrators, what do you guys look into or Google or search social media for? Christy's like, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we do.
Because I have an assistant principal. That's her whole job. And I will tell you, if you've never Googled yourself, please Google yourself. And your Facebook profile that comes up, even if you block completely, just never, ever, 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 ever put alcohol. Just don't. Just don't. It's not a thing. I know it might look like the most beautiful drink you've ever had in your life, but don't. We absolutely will search you on social media.
So that's before you even call someone in for an interview, correct or no?
Oh, absolutely.
See, I
do before.
Yeah. See, I don't have time to. But when I have a good candidate, I will search them out before I offer them the position, because I have found some very alarming things in my search. So,
I mean, what would you
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish. I didn't want to.
I will tell you that do not underestimate people and think they can't find stuff on the internet and on social media, because even if the principal looks too old and incapable of doing so, I guarantee you they have a child in their household who is very good at finding things out.
Yep. Another thing I'll do is, if I find out who you're friends with, if you're friends with somebody I know, I call that person and I ask what's on your Facebook page. So we are wildly searched.
Yep.
And it's mostly just because we want to know your character, and it doesn't go out and party with your friends and post pictures, and you're setting an example for youth. So I would just be really cautious what you put. I almost put nothing on Facebook anymore, because I've heard of teachers and principals and others lose over something that was misconstrued.
Yeah. And I will tell you that parents are even better at stalking you on social media.
And students. Never friend a parent. Just don't. They're your best friend. They're not your best friend. So do not friend parents. Just don't. I know they're lovely and they give you great gifts, and they're not your student anymore. They will sell you down the river the first chance they get.
Well, I asked. I used to do a lot of workshops and trainings for pre-service teachers through UCF, that's the school district, and I used to do sessions just on social media. And I always have the college students say, well, what does that have to do with my teaching job? It's my personal life. I can do what I want. And I'm sure the same argument, even though that was a few years ago, still is even more relevant today. especially with all the platforms and people putting everything they're doing every second of the day online, especially now. With all
I mean, you think about like how many CEOs have lost their position over Twitter or a tweet. Sorry, see that I'm showing my age. Like you are judged so heavily these days. It's just not worth putting it out there. You know, text it to your best friends. Don't put it out on the internet, and it's permanent. You might think you delete it, but there are memories in the computers. And honestly, I would hate to be a young kid right now because I would have had a much different social.
Well, and I want to give you an example from when my kids were in school. Now my kids are pretty old, and my children are 6 years apart. But there was a teacher and when my daughter was in high school, who, when she was in college, she did something for Playboy. And that got out somehow. And 6 years later, and she was older at this point, when my son was in school, there was still that it wasn't a rumor, it was true, but there was still that story going around about the teacher. And it was very difficult for her to get any kind of respect from parents because, of course, the parents knew. And she was a really good teacher, but she had that reputation. And so it affected all of her teaching. She was very standoffish, especially in a high school with boys. And the reality is all she did was she wore like her college shirt and shorts. It was USF, by the way, Christy. And so it wasn't a big deal, but that rumor got blown so out of proportion and became something it wasn't, that it really affected her career.
Well, I got a couple more questions and we can wrap this up here. So what qualities make a great teacher?
Oh, that's
so many qualities.
Yeah. Flexibility is a big one.
These are more general for your advice to our new teachers or people going to interviews.
I would think of a couple. This is one that you could really talk too long on. So I would maybe three that are important to you and really quantify on those three things. So when you're asked a huge question like this that you could go on and on and on, or, sorry, I hit the mute, or could be overwhelming, just narrow it down and pick like one or two or three things that you want to share about.
Mm-hmm. So what would be one of your top qualities of being a great teacher?
Flexible. I always say they're the flexible because they will never be bent out of shape. You have got to be flexible as a teacher.
And I think being a good communicator, just in general, you don't have to be a good communicator with, I know teachers who are great at talking to kids and terrible at talking to adults. Like they can't get up in front of a whole group and speak. And some people are very good at that. But I think really making that effort to communicate and build relationships with people, that's absolutely key. A good teacher, I like to tell my teachers that you can be the worst teacher in the world and have good relationships with kids, and all the parents are going to love you. You can be the best teacher in the world and not have good relationships with kids, and all you're going to do is be fighting battles all the time because you won't have the kids on your side and you won't have the parents on your side.
Great point. Awesome.
That is so true.
All right, two more to go here. What is the greatest challenge facing teachers today? I know this answer might be different than it was last year. Maybe it's not. What do you guys think?
I think that kind of goes back to Rhonda's point of turning this one into a positive of how you're going to, because yes, we have COVID. Yes, we have to wear masks all day long. We can't change any of that. We can't change any of the greatest challenges, but what we can do is respond to them and how are we going to manage them and how are we going to rise to the challenge? Because teachers have been rising to the challenge for years.
Okay. What about you, Rhonda? What do you think?
No, I wholeheartedly agree. I mean, I think right now is probably the most challenging time I've ever seen in education. And it's not about the challenge. It's how do you address the challenge? You know, are you going to back away? Are you going to come full on and say, we can do this, let's do it? And so again, it goes back to that, make it to a positive. They're always going to have challenges. For me, it's how do you face them?
And I would say one of the things that happens when you get into a school, you find your group. And if your group is a very negative thinking group, you're going to be miserable because they're constantly, it doesn't mean you can't have a session where you go and complain about things and, you know, hang out a little bit. But if you're constantly with a group that's focusing on the negative, it will wear you out so quickly. There's always going to be negatives. There's going to be another struggle after this one. There's going to be another struggle after that one. It is the nature of public school education. So you can either roll with the punches or you could be miserable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sounds like any profession, right?
Absolutely.
All right, last question of the day here. So I'll let each of you guys answer this. What's one piece of advice you would give a teacher as he or she goes into an interview now? So if someone's going in there in the next couple of weeks, or maybe after the new year, next time, what's one biggest piece of advice you would give them?
I would definitely say do your homework. Kind of what we started with. Learn about the school and make sure it's a good fit for you, and figure out if you're not sure if it's a good fit, why, and prepare those questions. Ask the questions that'll get to whether it's the right fit for you. I know that I really like working in Title I schools. So I purposely look for Title I schools. I would be terrible working with, parents that are high intensity all the time. That's just me. And so I know when I'm looking at school, but I know I have some deal breakers. I want support. I want to know that they're going to be out, that they're going to be there for me and support me. So I want to make sure that I've done my homework to know those things.
And I would say, understand that the principal, whoever's interviewing you, they want good people. And there is a teacher shortage, at least here in Florida, but I never hire because I'm desperate. So you should go into that interview just like you did your very first date, just like anything else that's incredibly important to you. Do your homework, be prepared, be personable. It's okay to be nervous. You are going to be nervous a little bit, and that's okay. But be passionate about what you're doing and what you're getting into. And I can teach you how to teach, but I can't teach you to be a good person, and I can't teach you to be somebody that I want around kids, So it really is, for me, be about the kids. It is always about the kids for us. And I will go without a teacher before I settle on a teacher. So don't go into it thinking, oh, this job's been up there a long time, I don't have to do much to get it.
I would agree.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Christine and Rhonda. I appreciate your time. Hang out for a minute here. We'll wrap this up. But I want to thank everybody for joining us here for another episode here on a Monday night. You guys, we had a lot of people watching this. I'm sure a lot of people on the recording going to be checking this out. I dropped their emails, these two school leaders' emails, in the comment box. Maybe you're thinking of moving to Florida. Heck, maybe you live in Central Florida and you need a job. They've got openings for you. So I dropped. I hope you guys don't mind. I put your emails in the comment box there, so you might get some resumes sent to you. So thanks once again for giving us an hour or so of your time to learn about some interviewing questions, what to do, what not to do. Real quick before we sign off, next week we're doing a similar session, different questions. We've got 4 principals joining us, this time from Orange County Public Schools. That's in Central Florida as well. But all of these questions, comments, concerns address any state. I don't care where you are in the United States. These questions are applicable and things that you're going to hear from the school leaders sitting across the table from you. So once again, I want to thank Christine and Rhonda for their time. And we're going to sign off, and we'll catch you next Monday night at 6 p.m. for another episode. And we will talk to you soon.